The Razorback football team gets a much-needed addition to the wide receiver position via the transfer portal. Razorback Baseball has a tough loss in the series against Vanderbilt over the weekend and what that means for their postseason seeding, as well as the famous story of a raccoon in Baum Walker Stadium. This is the Locked On Razorbacks podcast.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. I'm your host, John Nabors. I am also the host of Out of Bounds. You can catch every weekday afternoon from 1 to 4 on 103.7 The Buzz and 103.7thebuzz.com. Hope everybody had a wonderful weekend. As we know that we're hitting into the middle of May, a lot of you are going to start taking vacations, and it's getting warmer outside, and it's just like, I love this time of year. Maybe not for the content purpose, because it is a little bit more, I won't say difficult, but it's definitely a lot more challenging sometimes to go throughout the weeks of, looking for Razorback stuff to talk about. But hey, that's what my job is for, content creation and all that. Some people call me that. I'm not that. I'm a BS artist. Remember that one. But anyways, moving aside. We have a lot of stuff to talk about that did happen over the weekend, though, in Razorback sports. And a lot of you are, of course, curious about the baseball team, which we'll talk about and all of that. But as we know, when it comes to what people want to hear the most about and what people are most interested in and kind of what's always the thing that's going on is always about Razorback football and any type of new updates or news or anything that goes on with them as well. And over the weekend, this was something that if you listen to my show Out of Bounds, when we had Dudley Dawson on of Hogville.net last week, he kind of alluded to this possibly happening, and it officially came to fruition over the weekend where Arkansas, who needs depth at particular positions, wide receiver and defensive line being the main ones, well, they got a wide receiver, and he is former Toledo and Georgia wide receiver Matt Landers. Now, he's got one final season left, started with Georgia, then transferred to Toledo, and now decided to take his talents to Fayetteville and Arkansas. And here's the thing. Like, if you just look at some of the things that he has going on with him, he's 6'5", 200 pounds. So right off the bat, you're getting a pretty big-bodied wide receiver, which that's one thing that I always have preferred more so. Like, because people will bring up, oh, well, remember when Petrino had Joe Adams and Jarius Wright? Those guys weren't big wide receivers, but they were really good. I was like, yeah, but you can't always just assume that, a 5'11" or a 6 foot wide receiver is going to work out, because he has to be able to have those incredible athletic abilities like Wright and Adams did. Like, when the ball's in their hands, they can make plays. Or Jarius Wright with his tremendous route running. Like, those are pretty few and far between when it comes to those types of wide receivers, where you can get maybe some shorter guys, but with an extreme athletic prowess where, no matter what happens, they can still find a way to make a play. But in the SEC, I have always been a big proponent, and this is one of the things that I will actually give, just, mark the tape, a little bit of credit to Chad Morris, where he understood that in this conference, you have to have big wide receivers. Now, does every single one of them have to be 6'5" or above? No, I don't think that that's necessarily the case. But do they need to be able to have size over their cornerbacks and over the safeties that are going to be guarding them, to where it can be a quarterback's best friend, knowing that, hey, I may not be able to always get it to them because they may not always be wide open. But if they're not wide open, they can at least have the advantage of being able to jump on top of their cornerback or of the defender and make a play that way. It's just kind of an extra safety net, if you will, where, hey, they may not be a guy that gets wide open all the time, may not be the fastest guy, but having about 4 or 5 inches on the defender can always be a plus, especially with a quarterback trying to go downfield. So big guy with Matt Landers, 6'5" and 200 pounds. He's come from St. Petersburg, Florida, and it came out of there in 2017 class. And he said that the Hogs offered him a perfect situation to finish his collegiate career around people he'd known from Georgia, including Sam Pittman, and special teams coordinator Scott Fountain, and safety Latavius Brini, among others. And this is according to Danny West of hogsports.com. And the quote was, really just a great fit, great organization, great offensive coordinator, great receivers coach, and a great staff. Like I said, just familiar faces. That's what Matt Landers had to say. He was a 3-star recruit who signed with Georgia in the class of 2017. He spent 4 seasons with the Dogs and just wrapped up 12 catches for 132 yards and a touchdown in 24 games played. He then transferred to Toledo, where he caught 20 passes for 514 yards and a team high 5 touchdowns in 2021. With the Hogs, Landers will likely be asked to step in and immediately contribute to a position group that is a share of question marks in the spring. Arkansas is looking to replace the production of Traylon Burks from this past year. Landers is a second incoming wide receiver transfer next to Jaden Hazelwood. And it looks like as far as the wide receiver position goes, you're going to have Jaden Hazelwood, Warren Thompson, Ketron Jackson, Jaquaylin Crawford may get some playing time there as well. And Isaiah Santega, and maybe one of those guys that, is able to step right in and be that. We talked about the Joe Adams, Jarius Wright type player. He's 5'11", and he's got stupid speed. So maybe he could do that. And, of course, Matt Landers. So, this is something that is not a slight against anybody. It's not a slight against the team or any of the players on the roster or anything like that. But when you start to see late additions from the transfer portal like this, a lot of people are going to say, well, they're just needing depth. They don't have a lot of depth at that position. They just need some depth, which I think, yes, there could be some of that too. But I also think that Sam Pittman and Kendall Briles and the whole offensive staff, they looked at spring, they saw what they had, they saw the players and getting in them in those positions to run routes and all those things, and they went through the whole month. And after it all concluded, they probably got together and said, yeah, we need depth, but we also need someone else that can contribute. Because the guys that we have, none of them have really busted through. Jaden Hazelwood will be good. Warren Thompson's a guy that's got some playing time and had some experience from last year. And we have hope for some other of these guys, some potential guys, whether it's Ketron Jackson or whoever. But we need some veterans. We need some experience. We need some dudes, some men. Not just we're having to rely on 19-year-old kids to come in as a true freshman and play. We need some dudes that'll actually have some true experience to be able to help us out immediately. And I think that that's what Sam Pittman and the staff has really hammered home the point, and why Matt Landers was the perfect fit for him as well, because of the connection, because of the familiar faces that they had, and also the fact that he is a big-bodied wide receiver at 6'5", 200 pounds. So, putting all that together, do I think that Matt Landers is going to come in immediately and be the best wide receiver on this team? I don't know. I don't think any of us know, because a lot of it has to predicate on KJ Jefferson and who he has the closest knit, rapport with and the wide receiver trusts the most. Because that's something that everyone brings up when sometimes unfairly when it comes to wide receivers that come in. They'll just be like, oh, well, KJ is going to throw to this guy because he's the best wide receiver, or KJ is going to throw to this guy because, he was good at his last spot, so he'll be good at this spot and all of that. And here's what I throw to that as far as the caution behind it. And this is an example I bring up all the time. When Ryan Mallett was at Arkansas and you had all those great wide receivers, Ryan Mallett's favorite wide receiver to throw to was Greg Childs, especially in 2010, before Greg Childs got hurt. You remember how awesome Greg Childs was. A dude had it all: speed, athleticism. I think that I still believe that if he wouldn't have gotten hurt in that Vanderbilt game in 2010, he could have been for sure all SEC once the season was all over, maybe be one of the best wide receiver seasons you would have ever seen in Razorback history. But unfortunately for him, he got hurt and all that. But the next year, though, Tyler Wilson comes in and everyone's like, okay, well, Greg Childs, he's healthy, he's ready he's going to come back. And he did, but he didn't have the production. And now some of you may chalk that up to the injury that he had, but I chalked it up to the fact that Tyler Wilson as a quarterback didn't feel as comfortable or didn't have the same, bond with Greg Childs that Tyler Wilson had with someone like Jarius Wright, for instance, or Kobe Hamilton. And again, that's not a slight. It's just different. It's just different. Quarterbacks have different tendencies. They have different strengths and different weaknesses. And I think that they'll have, when it comes to even the wide receivers and the type of wide receivers that they throw to, they will prefer one or the other, or have a trust on one and not a trust on the other. Now, some guys will transcend that, like Traylon Burks. It didn't matter if Felipe Franks was throwing him the ball or if KJ Jefferson was throwing the ball. He was the best. He transcended all that. Of course, Chad Morris couldn't figure that out. But, some wide receivers are just that way. But if you throw another example, for crying out loud, Trey Knox as a wide receiver in Chad Morris's final year, Like, he led the team in receiving, and everyone thought that he was going to be the best wide receiver on the team because of how good he was and how many touchdown passes. And the next year, he was just a non-factor. Now, does that have to do with offensive changes in philosophy? Maybe. But again, everything changes and everything's different. And so with this guy like Matt Landers coming in, could he be just a guy that doesn't play too much? Maybe comes in, every so often and maybe makes a play every so often? Sure. But for all I know, he could come in and just be the go-to guy for KJ Jefferson because of the type of ability that he has and the type of rapport that they've built and the trust and bond that they share, especially when it comes to once fall camp comes around. So there's just a lot of different elements and moving pieces to all this that could work out. But the point is that when Arkansas is trying to build into being a better team, they are addressing the right things. And that's something that I will give a lot of credit to Sam Pittman and this staff, because I know some people just say, oh, well, it's easy to address needs with just bodies. Okay. But I don't believe that that's what Sam Pittman has done since he's arrived at Arkansas whenever he's having serious needs. It's not just guys that are there for the sake of being guys. Like, you're addressing every need. First off, you're not like running back, for instance. You're good at running back. You didn't need to go in and recruit 2 or 3 running backs because you always have so many great running backs. Like, you're good there. And you don't need to address that. Quarterback, kind of the same thing is, you got a quality one in KJ. You have a quality one in Malik Hornsby backing him up. Like, you got all these things together that seems to be, addressing the right needs. And Sam Pittman does a great job with that. But it's about quality depth. It's about guys that will actually be able to add something to your team. And then you can say, well, this player went to Toledo and didn't have the great numbers. Okay. But again, it's not like they're bringing him in because they need him to be the number one guy. Like, they went and got Hazelwood out of Oklahoma. They still have Warren Thompson, who's still a really good player, and has a lot of promise. Keatron Jackson, they have a lot of promise in as well. Quincy McAdoo, I've heard a lot of good things about him. So it's not like they just added him because they were so desperate that they needed just somebody to catch the ball. Like, they added him because they saw, hey, we needed some depth. And we're still not 100% confident in all the guys that we have, or at least the core group of guys that we have. So let's give this guy a shot. Let's see what he can do. And once he gets on the field, maybe he really surprises some people. Maybe he really changes it up and blows people away. But either way, it was a pretty good gift for Sam Pittman and the Razorbacks. And we'll see if how much of a contribution he gives to the Razorback football team this upcoming season. We'll talk about Razorback baseball and their weekend here in just a second. But first, I got to tell you about Built Bar and their new flavor of birthday cake puffs. Now, you hear that sounds like, this sounds like a child's like food or something like that, or some type of dessert. Well, you know what? It brings out the inner child in you, because if you ever been to a birthday party and you see the birthday cake, which everybody loves birthday cake, how many times have you just been like, I just want to eat the icing, just like dip my finger in and eat the icing and stuff? I've done that. Maybe not you, but I've done that many times. Still do it to this day. But for you, you don't have to worry about that anymore, because birthday cake puffs from Built.com and the Built Bar team is incredible. They sent me some of them, and it literally tastes like I'm eating birthday cake. It's unbelievable. And not only do they taste great, but it has 17 grams of protein. It's only 130 calories. It almost seems impossible. Almost seems like there's no way that they can taste this great and be this healthy, but that's absolutely the case. So I encourage all of you to try it. Like, you will not be disappointed. It's an incredible thing and an incredible new flavor that they created over at Built Bar. And if you, by listening to this podcast, if you go over to Built.com, enter in promo code LOCKED15, you'll get 15% off your next order. It's as simple as that. It doesn't matter how many you order. It doesn't matter if you buy out the entire store. If you enter in promo code LOCKED15, you'll get 15% off at Built.com.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, so moving on with the Razorback baseball team, and disappointing, I think, is the best way to put it, showing against Vanderbilt over the weekend, where they lost not only the series, but their first home series since 2019. And, Arkansas really needed this series. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say it's doom and gloom and that the season's over and that this team sucks, because that's stupid, that's asinine, and that's absurd if anybody else does that. However, that doesn't mean that it can't be disappointing. That doesn't mean that there can't be some element of criticism or some element of, being bummed because of this. And Arkansas, it's a crazy thing that a lot of people forget. Now, even though they're at the time, their top 4 team, I think they dropped to number 7 in D1Baseball.com after the series lost. But even though they're a top 4 team, even though they're number 7, their RPI is not great. In fact, it's outside the top 25 in the RPI rankings, and that's really what the committee looks at when it comes to deciding who hosts a regional, super regional, national seeds, and all those things too. And Arkansas really needed this series victory, to be able to kind of solidify themselves as being a national seed, a top 8 seed, because Vanderbilt had a really high RPI. I believe it was at 3 or 4. And if Arkansas was able to win this game, it would have bolstered them up right into the mix, and they would have been in great shape to have that national seed. Well, now it's not the case, especially in the fact that not only did they lose this series, but A&M was able to take care of business, I believe, against Mississippi State. And in the SEC West, Arkansas and A&M are now tied with the same SEC record. But since A&M beat Arkansas, they hold the tiebreaker, and this weekend's going to be big to see what happens between A&M and Ole Miss, as well as Arkansas and Alabama. So, but it was disappointing. And not only did Arkansas lose the series, but, in game 1, there was a lot of craziness going on there. Arkansas gets down big, and they storm back. They're able to tie it up, and then they lose in extra innings off of a big home run. But Arkansas then storms back in game 2, has a great showing, gets some hits there, and then it got rain delayed or lightning delayed, postponed until Sunday, where they finished the game. Arkansas took care of business. But then in game 3, Vanderbilt just got on Arkansas, and they couldn't score enough runs to get into the mix, and ended up losing. It's just in 5-0. I mean, that was the thing that it was so bad, is like, you can't win if you can't score. I know that's cliche, but it's true. And so that's what made it even more disappointing, is you feel like on Sunday, game 3, that should be the time where you're able to get the offense going in the best spot. And Arkansas just couldn't. So they're 37-14, 7-10 in SEC play. Still in pretty good shape. But now they fall to 18-2 in SEC home series over the last 4 seasons. Still really good. But either way, it was just disappointing, and to see how it all went down and the way it all went down and all that. But here's the silver linings of everything, and here's kind of where I hold my solace of why I feel like it's going to be okay, why there's no reasons to start freaking out, any of those things. Like, I believe in the fact that Arkansas, even if they're not a national seed, even if they're not hosting the super regionals, hoping and assuming that they get to that point, to me, that doesn't matter. And yeah, it'd be great for fans to see a super regional in Fayetteville, of course. It would be great to be able to experience that, of course. But when it comes to this team and making it back to the College World Series, because that is the goal, to make it back to Omaha, they're still perfectly capable of doing that. I think that they are still a good enough team to do that. It depends on matchups, depends on where they get and everything, and who would they get matched up against if they made it to that point into the super regionals and everything. But they're capable of doing that. And honestly, I am totally fine with them not hosting a super regional, just as long as you get a more favorable matchup. Now, we don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know who they're going to play. We don't know who's going to be involved. We don't know any of that stuff. But the fact is that this team still has a ceiling to get there. They still have the capability of getting there. And so my whole deal is like, I look at this team, and if they're able to take care of business in their regional, because they will host that, like they'll host a regional for sure. But if they're able to take care of business in that, and then they go to the supers, depending on who the team is, I think Omaha is absolutely on the table. Could they go 0-2 in barbecue in Omaha? Sure, they can. But I was thinking about a scenario too. Like, what if Arkansas wins a regional, and the regional they get matched up with, just because of how the math pans out and everything, their supers is against like Tennessee or something like that? Wouldn't that be spicy? Being over there in Knoxville once again. Oh man, that'd be intense. But like something like that would be fun. Maybe going to like Oklahoma State, like that would be ideal too. If like they had a super regional close by, like if they went to Oklahoma State or something like that. Again, we'd have to see what exactly how the numbers panned out. But I say all that to say this: don't worry, don't fret. It's disappointing, but it's baseball. This team, yeah, they're not going to win every SEC series. Sure, Vanderbilt's a good team. It's disappointing to lose it at home. You can be disappointed, but you can also still believe that this team can do some good things in the postseason. I want to see what they do against Bama this weekend. Bama's not a great baseball team. If they win that series, they're still in. Here's another thing too: they can still win the SEC West. Like they're still in perfect position to do that because I believe A&M has a tougher matchup against Ole Miss than Arkansas does against Bama. So if Arkansas is able to just win more games this weekend than what A&M wins, then they win the West. And you can't tell me that that's like considered a disappointing regular season if you win the SEC West again. We'll see what they do in Hoover and all those things too. But I'm not giving up on this team. I still think they can accomplish great things. But it was a disappointing showing, especially being at home. And now we got to see how they turn around, how they respond, and how they get it going. Hey, our partners at BetOnline.net continue to be the number one source for all your betting sports needs and info. Find all the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, fights, and even next season's NFL futures. And BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sporting wagering information, from live betting to playoffs to esports and to so much more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and actions over at BetOnline.net, where the game starts.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, so final segment of the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. I had to bring this up because it was the talk of the town over the weekend because we're talking about Razorback Baseball. And I can't wait, at least the recording of this podcast on this Monday. This individual is coming on my radio show on Out of Bounds at 1:30 today. So be sure to tune in if you get a chance. But Grant Harmon, like this guy who is a Razorback fan and was there at the game on Friday, there was a raccoon on the loose. All right. There was a raccoon on the loose in Baum Walker Stadium. And he took matters into his own hands to help get the raccoon out of there. And I'm just going to show you the video because if you're watching on YouTube, you'll be able to see it. Obviously, it'll be tough if you're listening. But on YouTube, this is the video of many videos that were taken about Grant and him finding a way to take care of the raccoon and get it out of Baum Walker Stadium. I don't know why it was so stretched out. But anyways, that's him taking the raccoon out and finding a way. And I thought this was like awesome. Like there was just such a great story for like Arkansas is that, and there was a second raccoon too. So maybe there was an infestation, but I just want to give a shout out to this man and the balls that he had and to be able to take a raccoon. And then not only is he carrying it out, but reports say he got bit by the raccoon and he wanted to go back inside, but all the health professionals, they were like, hey, dude, you got to go and get a rabies shot. Like, you got to go to the hospital. And so he put him in the hospital. He went to the hospital and missed out on the game. He was really bummed about that, got a rabies shot and came back the next day. And I saw that he went into the booth with the guys on the SEC network to talk more about it. And just like, this is the type of hero that we deserve, but maybe not the one we need type of thing. Like, that's a guy that, like, I could, because here's the thing. I'll be honest. Like, if I saw a raccoon, I ain't touching it. I'm leaving it alone. I'm just, running away or at least staying away from it. But this man didn't even think twice. Not only did he grab it, but he's got his phone out and he's filming himself taking it out and helping out the cause. And everyone, I saw some people like, if that poor little raccoon was probably scared. Well, what'd you want him to do? Did you want him just the raccoon to go through the crowds? Did you want him to be out there on the baseball field? You don't think that wouldn't be scary either? I think it's best just to get him out of there. And he did the right thing. So I want to know, and I can't wait to ask him about this today. I can't wait to hear how many like raccoons has he handled in his life? Is that something that, it's just like, is part of his job? Like, what does he do for a living? Is this something that, he's just always had a hobby of handling wild animals? Something like that. There's just a lot of stories that I can't wait to ask him about and get to as well. But what a cool little thing and an awesome thing for Arkansas to be a part of going viral, especially when everyone's talking about it. Just an awesome story. So either way, appreciate everybody listening in to the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or on Google Play. You also get after me on Twitter at BuzzJohnNabors for any questions, comments, concerns that you may have. We'll keep it going from there. Same podcast time, same podcast channel tomorrow afternoon. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you then.